Thank you very much for your kind remarks. I couldn't think of a better audience to address this short talk to. And I might as well begin, since I see the picture of the book there. Do you know what you're looking at? The name of this book is The New York Nobody Knows. That's why when Princeton University Press wanted to do something with the Chrysler Building, with the Brooklyn Bridge, I said, that's not the New York nobody knows, that's the New York everybody knows. I said, we need a gritty picture of New York City. Now, the truth is, this is not what you would call a gritty neighborhood, because this is the Upper West Side. You can see the buildings on Central Park, San Remo, et cetera, on the right. The reason we chose it is because it encompasses different styles of urban architecture. It encompasses the brownstones, it encompasses the tall apartment buildings, it encompasses the new tower up on 100th Street and Broadway, and I thought it would just be a very useful way to describe the city. How did I get interested in this topic? I really owe it all to my father, who inspired me to do this book and to whom the book is dedicated. When I was a kid, starting around the age of 7, my father devised a way to keep me entertained. Every weekend, we take the subway to the last stop. And then we would get out and walk around. Didn't know anything about studying the city. I was 7 years old. But I did learn a couple of things. First thing I learned was that when we took a subway and then a bus to Throg's Neck, I saw people fishing. I said, Dad, how's that happening? What's happening there? This was when TV was just a child, okay? Didn't know anything about the way things would be today. I always thought fish came from a store. I had no idea where they originated. My father poked his head into a bar on Utica Avenue one day. Everybody scattered. I had no idea. And we did this for about 5 years until we ran out of the stops. And I'm not only talking about the first stop. After we went to the last stop, there weren't any more. We went to the second to last stop. We went to the third to last stop. That's how I learned to know, love, and be inspired by this great and beautiful metropolis. Apparently, it was a good idea to walk. My father lived to 102. He died 2 years ago, and he walked 7 miles a day well into his 80s. So I guess it was a good idea. Anyway, I walked about 6,000 miles through all 5 boroughs of the city. I did about 30 miles a week, 120 miles a month, and 1,500 miles a year. So people said to me, what are you, crazy? Walking the whole city? Well, my response to that is as follows. People run, not walk the marathon every year. They train an average of 110 miles a week of running, which translates into 440 miles a year, 5,400 miles, almost what I did in the space of 1 year, but nobody calls them crazy. Why? Because they're training for the marathon. Well, that's fine, but that's a different way of looking at it. I learned just how different when I was sitting in a cab and a Senegalese marathon runner and I had a discussion. And I said to him, wow, that's pretty good. You got to run all these miles. And he said to me, your job is much harder. I said, why is walking much harder than running? He says, because it's so boring. You have to walk all this time. You know, I get to where I'm going much faster than you. So he missed the point. It's the journey, not the destination. That's what walking is all about. And so I really am an enthusiast of walking. Walking forces you to slow down. It allows you to enjoy what you see. And it allows you, as was said before, to interact with people, to talk with people. I hardly found anyone in this city, and I talked with hundreds and hundreds of people who said, I'm not talking to you, get away from me, don't bother me. That's a myth about New Yorkers, which we know about. And of course, I learned about gentrification, I learned about immigration, I learned about community, I learned about the spaces of New York. This is the meat and the bones of what sociology is about. People would say to me, jokingly I hope, why do you have to walk 4 hours every day or 5 hours every day? Why don't you just cheat a little? Why don't you just walk an hour and say you walked the other 4 hours? Well, as they say, who are you fooling except yourself? when you do that. I would know that I didn't walk it. And to me, that's really all that mattered. But what did I learn when I walked on these streets? Just to give you a few brief examples. I talked to a Guyanese man living in Jamaica and Queens. I walked by his house, I saw he had a beautiful garden, and I said to him, "Where did you get those beautiful flowers?" I don't do interviews like a normal sociologist. I don't say, "Excuse me, we're doing a study." Forget that. You can't walk the streets of the city and do that. No way. So he said to me, "Well, I'm glad you asked me. These flowers are flowers and come from my home country in Guyana. That's why they're out here, because every day in the morning when I get up and go to work, to my difficult job, I look at these flowers and I learn about the beautiful country that I left behind and that I loved so dearly." That speaks volumes about immigration. Or how about the man I met in Gowanus on 8th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, who told me the story about why there was a grocery store sign on the first floor of a brownstone on a street that had only brownstones on it, and that clearly wasn't a commercial area. He explained, and he was the grandson, that his grandfather owned a grocery store on that street many, many years ago, and that he wanted to have a memory that he was once there, that he did something, that he came from someplace else and slaved away to make something of his life. So the sign says P initial D Rosa, grocery. And every Christmas and Easter, they light up the Rheingold and Schaefer signs in the window to remember what this man did and what he achieved. How about the waterfall? You're being helped in many ways, as so many people in this great, beautiful city are helped by the Rockefeller Foundation. You want to see a waterfall in New York? I'm sure many of you know it. 51st Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, a privately owned park by the Rockefellers, but open to the public until about 7 p.m. But if you walk this city, and if you walk for 4 hours, because I found out about it in the last hour of my walk, you'll see a beautiful waterfall on 180th Street and Boston Road, deep in the heart of the Bronx. And I maintain that pretty much the city is safe almost anywhere, certainly during the daytime. You'll walk there and you'll see a waterfall that comes out of the Bronx River that is probably a half a block wide. It's probably the nicest waterfall in New York City. Go see it. It won't take you long to get there. It's worth seeing. Or maybe you'll go to 180th Street and Grand Avenue in the Bronx, in the West Bronx, west of Jerome and east of the river, and you'll find a church that advertises on its signboard that it does exorcisms every Friday night at 7:30. I'm not recommending it to you, I'm just suggesting it to you because the other day I met his grandson and I said, "What about that your grandfather had those exorcisms on Friday night?" He says, "Oh, don't talk to me about that. I'm scared of those. I never went in there when I was a kid." The man died about 8-9 years ago. The exorcisms are no more, but the reminder still exists. It's still on that blackboard because his family wants to remember who Delphin Rodriguez was. He had a dream. He had a dream that Mary came to him and told him he was the second son. And so he started running a church dedicated to the black, the brown, the mulatto, as it says on the signboard. Now, when you're an observer of the urban scene, you don't question people's dreams. You have a dream, it's your dream. You have a right to whatever dream you want. The man was, according to the local residents, a saint. He had a long white flowing beard and wore long white flowing robes. And he helped many, many people in the community. And ultimately, that is the main story. Or go to Steve's place on 85th Street between 20th and 21st Avenue in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, and you'll find a garden filled with statues and memories of what this man who is 62, Steve Campanella, lived through in his generation. It's a glorification of Brooklyn. It's all about Betty Boop, Marilyn Monroe, Clark Kent, the Fonz, and so many others statues. And inside his garage, he has 7 vintage cars and thousands of items from the years and decades through which he lived. So what can I say to you in conclusion? I can say that obviously it's very healthy to walk. My doctor says I'm certainly in better shape now than I was when I started. But please also understand that in addition to the Guggenheim, in addition to the Museum of Modern Art, in addition to the Museum of Natural History and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York is the world's greatest outdoor museum. All you have to do is walk it, and you'll see what I mean. This book is an effort to capture the heart and soul of the city. That's what it really is. It's not a statistical compendium. Oh, the references are all there. You'll find them in the footnotes. But in the 367 pages that comprise this first effort at understanding the entire city, you'll learn what life means to the hundreds of communities that make up this great city, and that's really what it's about. This city is made up of hundreds of communities, but they also are communities that are situated in the most sophisticated, technologically advanced city in the 21st century in this world. And that's what makes those communities different from Nebraska or Iowa. Because you can get on a bus in your community of Edgewater Park in the Bronx or Dyker Heights in Brooklyn, and you can be right here in 40 minutes. Thank you very much.